We have watched the VOC do extraordinary and terrible things. It invented the modern corporation. It cornered the world's most valuable spice, and in the last episode, we told plainly what that cost the people of the Banda Islands. But there is a question we have not yet asked. Once a company has armies and territory and the power of life and death over the people in it, where does it all run from? An empire needs a capital, a government needs a seat. So the company built one. This is the story of how a business founded a city, gave it a parliament and a courthouse, and ran it as the headquarters of a corporate empire. And, soberly, of who built it and kept it standing. This too belongs in the ledger. By the late 1610s, the VOC had a problem of geography. Its business was spread across the whole of maritime Asia: spice in the east, textiles in India, trade with China and Japan, the long sea lanes home. But it had no center, no single place from which to command it all. A trading network that vast needs a hub, a port to gather cargoes, a treasury to hold the silver, a council to make decisions on the spot, half a year's sail from Amsterdam. The directors back home could not run Asia by letters that took a year to arrive and answer. The company needed a capital of its own in Asia, and the man we met last episode, Governor General Jan Pieterszoon Coen, was about to choose where to put it. The site Coen chose was on the island of Java, at a place called Jayakarta, an existing port town on the coast, where a river met the sea. In 1619, the VOC took the site by force, cleared what stood there, and began to build its own city on the ground. They named it Batavia, after an old name for the Dutch homeland. Today you know that place by its modern name, Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, a city of millions. It began as the headquarters of a corporation. They built it to look like home, canals cut in the Dutch style, a great fort, warehouses, a town hall. A piece of the Netherlands transplanted onto a tropical coast 10,000 miles away to serve as the beating heart of the company's Asian empire for the next 2 centuries. Now remember what we learned in the very first episode. The VOC's charter gave it the powers of a state, to wage war, to make treaties, to mint coins, and to sit in judgment over people, up to the power of death. Batavia is where you could see all of that, standing in stone, in one place. The city had its own governing council. It had its own courts of law, handing down judgments in the company's name. It had a garrison, a mint, a treasury. The governor general ruled from here like a head of state, except he answered not to a king or a people, but to a board of directors and the shareholders behind them. Think about how strange that is. A functioning city, with a government, a judiciary, an army, and at the very top of it all, the ultimate authority was not a crown, it was a corporation. Batavia was, in the plainest terms, a city owned by stockholders. And here we have to be sober again, because the question of who built and ran this city has a hard answer. Batavia was constructed and maintained to a very large degree on the backs of enslaved and unfree people. The company brought enslaved men, women, and children from across the region, from other parts of the Indies, from South Asia, from Africa, to dig the canals, raise the walls, work the households, and keep the port and the city running. We should be careful with numbers across 2 centuries, because the records are incomplete, but it is clear that over its long life, the enslaved population of Batavia ran into the tens of thousands at a time, and that across the company's whole history, the number of people it held in bondage was very large indeed. For long stretches, the enslaved and unfree were a great part of the city's population, at times a majority of those who lived there. So when you picture that handsome Dutch town on its canals, picture this too. It was a corporate capital whose foundations, comfort, and daily survival rested on people who had no choice in being there. That is not a footnote to Batavia. It is part of what Batavia was. From this one city, the company governed. Batavia was where the VOC's authority in Asia was concentrated and enforced. Decisions made in its council shaped the lives of people across an ocean. Who could trade and who could not? Which crops would be grown? Which towns would be punished? Which treaties would be signed? The company set taxes. It administered justice. It made war and peace. That is the work of a government, and a government is what the VOC had become, not in theory, but in daily, grinding practice, run out of a city it had built for the purpose. It collected the rubbish, and it sentenced criminals, and it raised armies, all under a corporate seal. This is the heart of this whole series. We tend to think of companies and countries as different kinds of things. The VOC in Batavia proved they need not be. Hand a corporation the powers of a state, and it will build a capital and rule from it, exactly as a state would. The East India Company would, in time, learn to do the very same thing. The company now had its capital, and from it, a web of trade reaching across Asia. Next, we follow one strand of that web to its strangest and most isolated end, a tiny artificial island that was the only door for 2 centuries into a closed and forbidden country. A corporation founded a city, gave it a council and a courthouse, and governed an empire from behind its walls. And it built and sustained that city in large part on people it had enslaved. That is the full entry, both columns. The achievement, a global business run from a capital of its own, and the cost, counted in the lives that built it and were held within it. History audits both and refuses to let the second column go missing. We have told it soberly, as such a thing deserves. The account stays open. Tareekh Hisaab, history, audited. Hisaab abhi baki hai.